Washington, D.C. runs on a very specific kind of fuel. It isn't oil, and it isn't taxpayer money, though there's plenty of both to go around. No, the real engine of this town is performative boredom. The ability to take something consequential, something that affects the lives of 300 million people, and wrap it in so much bureaucratic bubble wrap that the average citizen falls asleep before they realize they've been robbed. December 19th, 2025, was supposed to be one of those days. If you walked into the Hart Senate office building that afternoon, you wouldn't have sensed history. You would have smelled stale coffee, floor wax, and the distinct, musk-like scent of ambition that hangs over Capitol Hill like low-level smog. The Senate Judiciary Committee was convening for what was billed as a routine oversight session. Even the name was designed to be ignored. It's the kind of meeting where staffers play Sudoku on their iPads and reporters check their phones for dinner reservations. But sitting at the witness table was Attorney General Pam Bondi. And sitting 3 seats down from the chairman, organizing a very specific stack of papers in a blue folder, was Senator Elizabeth Warren. To understand the massacre that was about to happen, and let's be clear, what we witnessed wasn't a debate, it was a forensic execution. We have to understand the two combatants. This wasn't just Democrat versus Republican. This was a clash of two fundamentally different species of political predator. The target, the Teflon prosecutor. Let's talk about Pam Bondi. By late 2025, Bondi had cultivated a very specific image. She was the telegenic warrior. Throughout her career, from Florida to the main stage of the DOJ, Bondi operated on a principle that has served modern politicians incredibly well. Style is substance. If you look the part, if you speak with that polished cable news cadence, and if you stay on message, you can deflect almost anything. She walked into that hearing room wearing that signature Navy suit, armor for the modern bureaucrat. Her demeanor was relaxed. Why wouldn't it be? She had survived the Florida political swamps. She had survived the chaotic orbit of the Trump years. She had navigated the shark tank of D.C. lobbying. In Bondi's world, Senate hearings are theater. You go in, you get yelled at by the opposition for the cameras, you give a non-answer, the chairman bangs the gavel, and you go to a steakhouse for dinner. It's a dance. Everyone knows the steps. Bondi's psychology going into this room is crucial to the drama. She was suffering from what I call the arrogance of the uncaught. When you have operated in the gray areas of campaign finance and lobbying for decades without facing a genuine consequence, you start to believe that consequences are things that happen to other people, to the sloppy ones. Bondi isn't sloppy. She's careful. She's a lawyer. She knows where the lines are. Or, at least, she thought she knew where the lines were. What Bondi didn't account for was the shifting landscape of 2025. She expected a political argument. She expected Warren to attack her on policy, on civil rights, on DOJ, sentencing guidelines. On the culture war, du jour Bondi was ready for that. She had her talking points memorized. She had her, I'm just enforcing the law shield polished and ready. She didn't know that the conversation wasn't going to be about policy. She didn't know that while she was prepping sound bites, the Treasury Department's FinCEN division had been quietly logging wire transfers from Cyprus. Bondi sat down at that table, poured herself a glass of water, and smiled at the chairman. That smile is the most tragic part of the footage in retrospect. It's the smile of a driver checking their rearview mirror while heading straight off a cliff. The hunter, the librarian with a shiv. Now look at the other side of the dais. Elizabeth Warren. By 2025, the media had often caricatured Warren as the schoolmarm of the Senate. They painted her as the nagging professor, the one who wants to lecture you about the economy until your ears bleed. And truth be told, Warren often leaned into that. But her opponents frequently made the fatal mistake of confusing boring with weak. Elizabeth Warren isn't a show pony. She's a bankruptcy law professor. Do you know what bankruptcy lawyers do? They don't make speeches. They look at the math. They dig through the trash cans of financial history to find where the money went. They understand that while people lie, ledgers don't. Warren's preparation for this hearing was surgical. While other senators rely heavily on young staffers to write their questions, Reports from inside her office suggest Warren had been personally obsessing over the Baltic connection for 6 weeks. This wasn't a fishing expedition. Most senators go fishing. They ask broad questions hoping to catch a gaff. Warren wasn't fishing. She was hunting. She already had the kill. She just needed to drag the carcass into the light. Watch the footage of her before the questioning starts. While Senator Cruz is preening for the cameras and Chairman Durbin is shuffling papers, Warren is still, dead still. Her blue folder is closed. Her hands are folded. She isn't looking at the cameras. She's looking at Bondi. There's a specific kind of psychological warfare in that stare. It's the look of someone who knows the answer to the question they haven't asked yet. It's the Perry Mason moment, but in real life, Perry Mason moments are exceedingly rare. Usually, the witness lies and the lawyer has to move on. But Warren had something better than a clever argument. She had the receipts. Literally. The atmosphere. The calm before the slaughter. Let's set the scene of the room itself. The Senate Judiciary Committee room is designed to be intimidating, but usually it just feels sterile. The wood paneling, the high ceilings, the raised dais where the senators sit like Olympian gods judging the mortals below, it's all meant to project power. But on this day, the room was strangely quiet. It was the end of the year. The holidays were approaching. Most of D.C. had already mentally checked out. The press gallery was only half full. The C-SPAN cameras were rolling, automated and indifferent. This low-energy atmosphere was actually part of the trap. If the room had been packed, if the tension had been high from the start, Bondi's guard might have been up. She might have been more defensive, but the banality of the setting lulled her into a false sense of security. It felt like a housekeeping meeting. The first hour of the hearing reinforced this. It was mind-numbing. Senators asked about budget allocations for the Bureau of Prisons. They asked about staffing levels in rural districts. Bondi fielded these questions with ease. She was charming, competent, and utterly bored. You could see her checking her watch under the table. She was thinking about her flight home. She was thinking about the cocktail party she was hosting that weekend. She was absolutely not thinking about a bank in Latvia called Riedemu. The pivot point. The turning point came at 2:47 p.m. The timestamp is important. It was late in the afternoon session. Blood sugar is low. Attention spans are fraying. It's the time of day when mistakes happen. Chairman Durbin recognized Senator Warren. Senator Warren, you have 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That's the currency of the Senate. You can't change the world in 5 minutes, usually. You can barely get a preamble out in 5 minutes. Most senators waste the first 2 minutes thanking the witness and grandstanding for their local constituents. Warren didn't thank anyone. She didn't welcome Bondi. She didn't make a speech about the importance of justice. She adjusted her microphone, opened the blue folder, and dropped the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "Miss Bondi," she began. The tone wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was conversational. And that was the scariest thing about it. If Warren had come out screaming, "You are corrupt," Bondi would have won. Bondi knows how to handle a screamer. You just act calm and call them hysterical. But Warren didn't scream. She asked a technical question about communication logs. This is the professor's trap. She engaged Bondi's intellect. She invited Bondi to explain the process. "Official channels bring me hundreds of communications," Bondi had answered, full of bureaucratic pride. She fell right into the rhythm of explaining how efficient her office was. She wanted to show off her competence. And that is where the tragedy, or the comedy, depending on your perspective, begins. Bondi thought she was taking a test on office management. She didn't realize she was taking a test on international money laundering, and she had already failed it 3 weeks ago. The disconnect. This moment, right before the first piece of evidence drops, is what makes this scenario so compelling to watch. It represents the fundamental disconnect in modern politics, the disconnect between the narrative and the reality. For years, politicians like Bondi have lived entirely in the narrative. In the narrative, truth is malleable. You can spin anything. If you get caught taking money, you call it consulting. If you get caught meeting with Russians, you call it diplomacy. The narrative is a soft, warm blanket that protects the powerful from the cold winds of accountability. But the reality is cold. The reality is math. The reality is a SWIFT code on a wire transfer that says $251,000 moved from account A to account B on June 8th. The narrative cannot survive contact with the reality, provided someone has the courage to hold the two up side by side. Warren was about to do exactly that. She was about to take Bondi's carefully constructed narrative and smash it against the jagged rocks of reality. As Warren turned the page in her folder, the camera caught a glimpse of a document. It wasn't a speech. It was a spreadsheet. Rows and columns. Dates and dollar amounts. Bondi didn't see it yet. She was still looking at Warren's face, trying to read the political angle. She was looking for the ideology. She was looking for the partisan attack. She was looking in the wrong place. The attack wasn't coming from the left. It wasn't coming from the right. It was coming from the ledger. And as the clock ticked to 2:48 p.m., the stage was set. The trap was primed. The doors were locked. And Pam Bondi, the confident, untouchable Attorney General, was about to have the worst 83 seconds of her entire life. Before we return to Senator Warren and the slaughter she is about to unleash, we need to take a detour. We need to leave the sterile air of the Hart Senate office building and descend into the plumbing of the global economy. To understand why Pam Bondi is about to lose her career over a bank in Latvia, you have to understand how modern corruption actually works. It isn't bags of cash in a parking garage. That's for amateurs and Netflix writers. Real corruption, the kind that moves geopolitical needles, is digital, is boring, and it is designed to be invisible. Welcome to the laundromat. The mechanics of the wash. The $847,000 that landed in an account controlled by Bondi's associates didn't just teleport there. Money, like water, needs pipes. And in the world of illicit finance, the pipes are built to hide the source of the water. In a transcript of the hearing, you're going to hear Warren throw around names like Baltic Holdings and Riedema Banka. To the average viewer, these are just random nouns. But to a forensic accountant, they tell a very specific story. They are the fingerprints of a classic Russian laundromat scheme. Here's how it works. Imagine you're a Russian oligarch or a state-linked entity. You have millions of dollars. But it's dirty. It's sanctioned. You can't just wire it to a U.S. politician. If you send a wire transfer from Gazprom Bank Moscow directly to Pam Bondi, Washington, D.C., every alarm bell at the Treasury Department will ring. You'll be in handcuffs before lunch. So, you need to wash the money. You need to make it look like legitimate commerce. Step 1. The shell, the Cyprus connection. It starts in Cyprus. Why Cyprus? Because for decades, Cyprus has been the Mediterranean piggy bank for Russian capital. It's inside the European Union, which gives it a veneer of respectability. But its corporate opacity laws are, let's call them, flexible. The entity Warren mentions, Baltic Holdings Limited, is what we call a shell company. It has no employees. It has no office. It produces no goods. It is a folder in a filing cabinet in Nicosia. In our story, the Russian money enters Baltic. But Baltic isn't the final destination. It's just a pass-through, a ghost. Step 2. The choke point, the Baltic Bridge. This is the most critical part of the infrastructure, and it's the specific detail that traps Bondi. The money has to move from the chaotic east to the regulated west. It needs a gateway. Enter Latvia and Estonia. For 20 years, Baltic banks served as the bridge between Russia and the West. They speak Russian, they understand the culture of post-Soviet business, but they have IBAN numbers that work in New York and London. Warren identifies Riedema Banka in Riga, Latvia. Now, in the real world and in our story, Riedema has a history. It's a bank that specializes in non-resident clients. That's banker speak for people who don't live here, but need to move money through here. The $847,000 moves from Baltic, Cyprus, to an account at Riedema, Latvia. Now, the money has a European passport. It doesn't look Russian anymore. It looks Latvian. It looks European. It's getting cleaner. Step 3. The black hole, the Delaware LLC. Finally, the money needs to land in the United States. But Bondi can't receive it personally. That's too obvious. So, she, or her associates, uses the greatest gift America has ever given to the global money laundering industry, the state of Delaware. We love to lecture other countries about corruption, but the truth is, it is easier to set up an anonymous shell company in Delaware than it is to get a library card. You don't need to list the owner. You just need a registered agent, usually a lawyer. In the hearing, Warren reveals that the money went to an undisclosed Delaware LLC registered to Bondi's former law partner. This is the brilliance of the scheme. Source: anonymous Russian entity. Layer 1, Baltic, Cyprus shell. Layer 2, Riedema Banka, Latvian bridge. Destination: Delaware LLC, American shell. By the time the money hits the U.S. account, it looks like a consulting fee for business strategy. It's clean. It's boring. It's invisible. Why it failed? The FinCEN factor. If this system is so perfect, how did Bondi get caught? She got caught because of the correspondent banking problem. Here is the technical detail that makes Warren's trap so deadly. Even though Riedema is a Latvian bank, it cannot move U.S. dollars by itself. Only American banks can clear U.S. dollars. So, when Riedema sends dollars to Delaware, it must use a correspondent bank in New York, like J.P. Morgan, Citibank, or a Deutsche Bank New York, to process the transaction. Every time a dollar moves through New York, it leaves a digital footprint. And the U.S. Treasury Department's FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, sees it. Usually, there are billions of transactions, and these small ones get lost in the noise. But remember the date Warren mentioned? December 19th, 2025. Warren mentions that she spent 6 weeks coordinating with Treasury Department investigators. This implies a leak, or a targeted investigation. Someone at FinCEN flagged the Baltic-Riedema-Delaware pattern. They saw the pattern: $178,000, $223,000. Round numbers. Suspicious timing. They pulled the thread. And when they looked at who owned the Delaware LLC, they found the name of Bondi's law partner. The technical violation lie. This brings us to the most infuriating moment of the hearing. The moment Bondi tries to dismiss this as a low-risk technical violation. In part 1, we saw her arrogance. Now we understand the source of that arrogance. In Bondi's mind, she didn't steal money. She provided a service. She engaged in consulting. The fact that she didn't fill out a specific disclosure form, FARA, Foreign Agents Registration Act, is, to her, a paperwork error. Like forgetting to renew your car registration. Technical violation is the favorite phrase of the white-collar criminal. You rob a liquor store? That's a crime. You take $847,000 from a foreign adversary to change U.S. banking policy? That's a technical violation. Bondi's defense relies on the complexity we just described. She is banking on the fact that the average voter and the average senator doesn't understand correspondent banking. She thinks if she uses big words like regulatory feasibility and compliance burdens, people's eyes will glaze over and she will walk free. She is betting on the complexity to save her. The smoking gun, policy for sale. But here is where the corruption moves from passive to active. And this is the pivot point of our entire video essay. It wasn't just that Bondi took the money. It's what she did for the money. Warren's evidence doesn't just show cash flow. It shows quid pro quo. The payment, June 8th, $251,000 wire transfer. The action, June 9th, the very next day, Bondi attends a Senate Banking Committee meeting. What was the meeting about? Tightening correspondent banking rules for Baltic financial institutions. Do you see the beauty of a circle? The Russians pay her through the Baltic banks. The U.S. government tries to crack down on the Baltic banks. Bondi uses her power to protect the Baltic banks. Why? Because if the banks get shut down, her payments stop. She wasn't just protecting a bank. She was protecting her own payroll department. The encryption aspect. One final technical note before we go back to the room. Warren mentions 19 secret emails and destroyed encryption keys. This is the modern equivalent of burning the tapes. Bondi used a VPN, virtual private network, and encrypted email services. Again, she thought she was smart. She thought, if I use encryption, they can't read the emails. She was right. Warren can't read the content of the emails. Warren admits this. The actual content remains unavailable. But Warren doesn't need to read them to destroy Bondi. She has the metadata. She knows who sent them, server in Estonia. She knows when they arrived, just before key policy decisions. She knows where Bondi was when she checked them. In a court of law and in the court of public opinion, this is called consciousness of guilt. Innocent people do not use military-grade encryption to talk about regulatory feasibility and then destroy the keys 3 days before a hearing. Setting the trap. So, now we have the full picture. We have the stage, part 1, a boring hearing room, an arrogant attorney general, and a silent hunter. We have the weapon, part 2, a complex, multi-layered money laundering scheme involving Cyprus shells, Latvian banks, and Delaware loopholes, all tied together by a clear pattern of pay-to-play policy decisions. Bondi thinks she is walking into a policy debate. She thinks she can use technical violation as a shield. She doesn't realize that Warren has deciphered the architecture. Warren isn't going to ask her about policy. Warren is going to walk her through the blueprint of her own crime, step by step, dollar by dollar. The complexity that Bondi thought would save her, Warren is about to turn it into the noose. Let's go back into the room. It's 2:48 p.m. Warren is opening the blue folder, and the first wire transfer is about to hit the table. We're back in the room. It is 2:48 p.m. To the untrained eye, nothing has happened yet. No voices have been raised. No gavel has been banged. But in the world of high-stakes litigation, the war is often over before the first shot is fired. It's over the moment the witness commits to a version of reality that the prosecutor can disprove. Senator Warren didn't just start reading bank statements. That would have been clumsy. That would have given Bondi a chance to say, "I need to check my records," and wiggle out of it. No, Warren needed Bondi to lock the door from the inside first. She needed Bondi to lie on the record, under oath, about something simple. This is what I call the process trap. The opening gambit, generalities. Warren's first question was a masterclass in deception. Listen to the phrasing. During the period spanning March through November of this year, were any communications from foreign nationals received by you concerning policy matters within your official duties? It sounds like a boilerplate question. It sounds like something a staffer wrote just to fill time. It's broad. It's vague. Foreign nationals. That could mean anyone. That could mean the French ambassador. That could mean a Canadian trade rep. Bondi relaxes. You can see her shoulders drop about half an inch. She thinks she's on safe ground. She thinks Warren is fishing for some minor ethics breach about a diplomatic dinner. So Bondi engages her competence protocol. She wants to sound like the diligent Attorney General. "Senator, official channels bring me hundreds of communications each month. Our counsel's office reviews and logs every one as regulations require." Do you see what she just did? She didn't just say no. She appealed to procedure. She hid behind the bureaucracy. She's saying, "I am so professional, I have a system for this." This is the hubris of the bureaucrat. She believes her own system protects her. She is effectively saying, if there was a corrupt communication, my staff would have caught it. The pivot, specificity. Warren nods. She accepts the answer. And then, she tightens the noose by 1 degree. My question pertains specifically to communications originating from Russian nationals or intermediaries with Russian connections. The room changes. The word Russian carries weight in D.C. It has a specific frequency. It wakes people up. Bondi pauses. It's a short pause, maybe a second. But in that second, her brain is racing. She knows she met Volkov. She knows about the emails. But she also knows she used encryption. She knows she used a shell company. She calculates the odds. Does she know? No, she can't know. The keys are destroyed. The LLC is dissolved. Bondi gambles. She bets on the secrecy. "Not to my knowledge, Senator." Click. That is the sound of the trap snapping shut. That is the sound of a perjury charge loading into the chamber. "Not to my knowledge" is the standard DC lie. It's designed to give you plausible deniability later. "Oh, I forgot." But Warren isn't going to give her later. Warren is going to give her right now. The first card, the name drop. Warren doesn't look up. She turns a page in the blue folder. The rustle of the paper is the only sound in the room. Does the name Baltec Holdings Limited mean anything to you? This is the micro-tell moment. Watch Bondi's face in the footage. When Warren says Baltec, Bondi doesn't flinch in a dramatic way. She doesn't gasp. She's too pro for that. But look at her eyes. She blinks. Rapidly. Twice. And she shifts her weight forward. Why? Because Baltec Holdings is a secret. It's a name that only exists in a filing cabinet in Cyprus and on the wire transfer documents Bondi thought were buried. Hearing that name in the Senate Judiciary Committee is like hearing your childhood nickname whispered in a graveyard. It shouldn't be there. Bondi realizes for the first time that the blue folder isn't a prop. It's a weapon. She tries to stall. It's a company registered in Nicosia, Cyprus. Warren adds helpfully, twisting the knife. Bondi's response is weak. My records would need reviewing. This is the pivot to ignorance. A minute ago, she was bragging about how her office reviews everything. Now, suddenly, she needs to check her records. The mask of competence is slipping. The assistant's move. Warren doesn't let her check her records. Allow me to provide assistance. This is the most aggressive sentence in the entire transcript. It is polite, it is parliamentary, and it is absolutely savage. It implies, you are lying, you are drowning, and I'm going to hold your head under the water while pretending to teach you how to swim. Warren lifts the document. This is visual theater. She wants the cameras to see the paper. She wants Bondi to see the paper. 4 wire transfers to a Delaware limited liability company were flagged by Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Boom. FinCEN. Now Bondi knows exactly what happened. She knows the laundromat we discussed in Part 2 has been breached. She knows the correspondent bank leaked. Bondi's confident posture, hands clasped on the table, suddenly looks rigid. She looks frozen. This is the freeze response. In evolutionary biology, when a predator spots you, you freeze. Bondi is freezing. She is hoping that if she doesn't move, the evidence will disappear. The geographic box. Warren begins to build the box around Bondi. She doesn't just list the crime, she lists the geography. The LLC registration shows your former law partner's name. The processing intermediary was Riedema Banca in Riga, Latvia. She is cutting off every exit. Exit 1. It wasn't me. Dash, it was your law partner. Exit 2. It was legitimate business. Dash, it came from a bank flagged for money laundering. Exit 3. I didn't know. Dash, you defended this specific bank in a hearing 24 hours after the transfer. The questions aren't questions anymore. They are statements of fact with a question mark glued to the end. The tension of the unknown number. We are now at the 2:49 p.m. mark. The tension in the room is suffocating. Everyone knows something bad is coming. The reporters are leaning forward. The other senators have stopped checking their phones. Chairman Durbin is staring at Bondi with a look of genuine concern. But the audience and Bondi doesn't know the scale yet. Are we talking about $10,000? A free vacation? A consulting fee? Warren pauses. She lets the silence stretch. This is the dramatic gap. She wants everyone to wonder about the price tag. What is the price of an attorney general? Bondi is silent. She is staring at the water glass. She wants to drink it, but she knows that if she reaches for it, her hand might shake. And if her hand shakes on C-SPAN, it's over. So she leaves it there, a monument to her paralysis. Warren looks at the document one last time. She is checking the numbers. She wants to be precise. She is about to turn Baltec Holdings and Riedema Banca from abstract concepts into a concrete, career-ending reality. She looks up. Transfer dates were March 14th, April 22nd, June 8th, and September 3rd of 2025. The timeline is established. The trap is set. The prey is in the box. The door is locked. And now, Senator Warren is about to drop the guillotine. History is rarely made in hours. It is made in moments. It is made in the blink of an eye when the facade cracks and the truth spills out like oil on a pristine floor. We are at 2:49 p.m., 60 seconds into the questioning. Warren has established the laundromat. She has established the names. Now, she establishes the price. The rhythm of ruin. Warren doesn't just read the numbers. She recites them. There's a cadence to it, like a metronome ticking down the final seconds of a career. The amounts were $178,000. Pause. $223,000. Pause. $251,000. A slightly longer pause, and $215,000. She looks up over the rim of her glasses. Total, $847,000 in Russian-linked transfers to an entity connected to the Attorney General of the United States. The number hangs in the air. $847,000. Why is this number so devastating? Because it's not enough. If it were $50 million, it would feel abstract. It would feel like a movie villain's ransom. But $847,000? That's a house in the suburbs. That's a retirement fund. That is a number that every person watching at home can visualize. It makes the corruption feel cheap. It implies that the Attorney General of the United States can be bought for the price of a modest condo in D.C. The room reacts. The transcript says, gasps rippled through the hearing room. That's an understatement. The oxygen left the room. You can see the staffers behind Bondi stiffen. They stop typing. They know. In D.C., you survive a scandal by spinning the interpretation. You cannot spin a wire transfer. Math has no bias. Math has no party affiliation. Bondi's reaction is a masterclass in physiological betrayal. Her face remains composed. She's had too much Botox and media training to grimace. But look at her knuckles. They are white. She is gripping her own hands so hard she is cutting off the circulation. She is physically holding herself together. Warren asks the follow-up, and it's a rhetorical dagger. Do you wish to modify your earlier response that you had no knowledge of Russian communications? The weaponized silence. This is the moment the video title refers to. Bondi remains silent. In a normal debate, you fight back. You say, "Senator, I resent that implication," or "Those were business dealings from a previous life." But Bondi says nothing. Why? Because of the perjury trap. If she denies it, she commits perjury because Warren has the documents. If she admits it, she confesses to a crime, FARA violations. So she chooses option C, the Fifth Amendment, without saying the Fifth Amendment. She chooses silence. But on television, silence is an admission. In the court of public opinion, silence is guilt. The visual kill shot. Warren doesn't wait for an answer she knows isn't coming. She signals to a staffer. The staffer rolled a large monitor into camera range. This is the modern equivalent of bringing the murder weapon into the courtroom. The FinCEN report appears on screen. Redacted names? Yes, but the codes are there. The routing chain is there. Tallinn-Riga-Wilmington. It's one thing to hear about corruption. It's another thing to see the routing number. It turns the accusation into undeniable reality. The timeline of treason, quid pro quo. Now Warren moves from the money to the act. This is crucial. Taking money from Russians is bad. Changing U.S. law for Russians is treasonous. Warren connects the dots with a timeline that is so tight it leaves no room for coincidence. On June 9th of 2025, Warren says, pointing to the calendar, the day following the third wire transfer of $251,000, your attendance at a closed-door Senate Banking Committee meeting is documented. Let's look at that graphic again. June 8th, $251,000 hits the account. June 9th, Bondi argues against sanctions on the bank that sent the money. It's almost too perfect. It's the kind of plot point a scriptwriter would reject for being too obvious. But reality is often unsubtle. The pay-to-play mechanics here are transactional and immediate. The check cleared, so the employee went to work. Warren presses. Does this refresh your memory? Bondi tries to pivot. She finally speaks. Her voice is different now. It's thinner. The resonance is gone. Regulatory feasibility concerns were what I provided. Regulatory feasibility. It's a shield made of paper. She's trying to make her corruption sound like administrative caution. She's trying to bore the audience into forgiveness. The low-risk email. But Warren is ready for the boredom defense. She has the smoking gun email. At 2:50 p.m., exactly 83 seconds into the questioning, Warren drops the final bomb. September 4th, 2025, an email departed from your official Justice Department account. The subject read, Urgent review of proposed FinCEN enforcement expansion. This is the moment Bondi knows it's truly over. Because this isn't a Russian email. This is a DOJ email. This is her using her government computer, her government title, to do the dirty work. Warren reads Bondi's own words. These requirements risk overcapitalizing enforcement resources on low-risk technical violations. Warren pauses. She takes off her glasses. This is the only theatrical gesture she allows herself. Low-risk technical violations. That's your characterization as Attorney General of $847,000 in Russian link transfers to an undisclosed LLC. This is the kill shot. Warren takes Bondi's bureaucratic language and translates it for the American people. Regulatory burden equals stopping me from getting paid. Low-risk technical violation equals my $847,000 bribe. She strips the mask off. She reveals that when Bondi was talking about overcapitalizing resources, she was talking about protecting her own bank account. The paralysis. The description of Bondi in the transcript at this moment is haunting. Bondi's breathing pattern had slowed. Her eyes stayed fixed forward, unable to meet Warren's prosecutorial gaze. This is the physiological state known as disassociation. Bondi is physically in the room, but mentally, she is checked out. She is watching her life burn down, and she is unable to move. She can't reach for the water. She can't look at her lawyers. She can't look at the camera. She is just existing, waiting for it to end. The meaning of the 83 seconds. Why did this 83-second clip go viral? Why are we analyzing it like the Zapruder film? Because it represents a reversal of the natural order of DC. Usually, the politician talks for 5 minutes and says nothing. Here, the politician said nothing, and the silence said everything. Usually, the money is hidden in complexity. Here, the money was put on a screen down to the dollar. Warren didn't just expose a crime. She exposed the banality of the crime. She showed us that the betrayal of the country doesn't look like a spy movie. It looks like an email about regulatory feasibility sent from a government BlackBerry. The pivot to the cover-up. But Warren isn't done. The money is just the what. Now she wants the how. She leans back. The folder is still open. The encrypted emails warrant discussion. The room is silent, but the air is electric. Bondi hasn't moved, but the mention of encryption causes a stir at the press table. Money is greed. Encryption is conspiracy. Warren is about to move from proving corruption to proving obstruction of justice. And if $847,000 gets you fired, obstruction gets you prison. The 83 seconds are over. The destruction is complete. But the burial? The burial is just beginning. In the world of criminal law, there's a concept called consciousness of guilt. It is a simple idea. Innocent people make mistakes. Guilty people make plans to hide their mistakes. If you accidentally speed through a red light, you stop and apologize. If you rob a bank, you paint the getaway car a different color and burn your clothes. What Senator Warren exposed in the first 83 seconds was the crime, the money. What she exposes in the next 10 minutes is the felony that sends people to prison, the cover-up. The narrative shifts here. We move from Bondi, the corrupt politician, to Bondi, the criminal defendant. And the evidence Warren presents paints a picture of a woman in panic, frantically trying to erase her digital footprint before the authorities knock on the door. The digital shredder. Warren leans forward. The tone changes. It's less gotcha and more we know what you deleted. The encrypted emails warrant discussion, she says. 19 separate messages. Server origins included Estonia, Cyprus, and a Moscow data center. Let's pause on the technology here. An Attorney General of the United States using a VPN registered in the British Virgin Islands to communicate with servers in Moscow is not sloppy. It is tradecraft. This is spy stuff. This is the kind of operational security you use when you know that what you're doing is illegal. But here is the catch with modern technology. You can hide the content, but you can rarely hide the activity. Warren admits she doesn't have the emails. Why? Encryption key destruction occurred on November 30th. Think about that date. November 30th. That is 19 days before this hearing. That is 1 day after she dissolved the shell company. That is 2 days after she met with her handler. This is what prosecutors call a spoliation of evidence. Bondi didn't just lose the keys. She nuked them. She realized the Treasury Department was sniffing around and she ran the digital shredder. In a courtroom, if you destroy evidence just before an investigation, the jury is instructed to assume the evidence contained the worst possible information. By destroying the keys, Bondi effectively admitted that those emails contained the smoking gun. The fixer, enter Dmitry Volkov. Every scandal needs a bagman. Every conspiracy needs a connector. In this story, that man is Dmitry Volkov. At the 12:30 mark, Warren slides a photograph across the table. It's a classic surveillance shot, grainy, probably taken from a car or a security camera. Your in-person meeting with Volkov occurred November 28th at an Arlington, Virginia hotel. Duration, 47 minutes. Who is Dmitry Volkov? Warren tells us, U.S.-Russian dual nationality. His firm has represented Gazprom Bank's subsidiaries. He is the fixer. Let's reconstruct the panic. Late November, Bondi likely gets wind that a reporter or an investigator is asking questions about Baltec Holdings. November 28th, she meets Volkov in panic mode. They're on to us. What do I do? The instruction, Volkov, being the professional, gives the order. Shut it down. Look at the timeline immediately following that 47-minute meeting. It is a cascade of destruction. Meeting, November 28th. LLC dissolved. November 29th, the next morning. Keys destroyed. November 30th, the day after that. Disclosure amended. December 2nd. This isn't coincidence. This is a cleanup operation. When Warren asks, what occurred in that 47-minute meeting? The silence from Bondi is deafening. Bondi cannot answer, because the truth is likely. He told me how to destroy the evidence. And you can't say that on C-SPAN. The oops defense, amending the forms. The most pathetic part of the cover-up is the attempt to legitimize the money after the fact. Warren notes, December 2nd, 5 years of your financial disclosure forms receive amendments. This is the desperate Hail Mary of a caught politician. Oh, I forgot to mention that consultancy income. Let me just write it in now. It's insulting. She amends the forms 3 weeks before the hearing, hoping that if she puts a footnote saying consultancy income under review, it somehow absolves her of taking Russian money. But notice what she didn't list. She didn't list the source. She didn't write Baltec Holdings. She just wrote income. She was still trying to hide the Russian connection while pretending to be transparent. It's a half measure that satisfies no one and incriminates her further. The phone call, the direct link. Warren has one final nail for the coffin. The phone records. June 7th, 2025. Call to BC Strategy. Duration 34 minutes. Why does this matter? Because BC Strategy shares an address with Baltec, the money source, and the wire transfer entities. But look at the timing again. Call, June 7th. Money, June 8th. Policy change, June 9th. This call is the negotiation. This is the moment the deal was cut. I will block the sanctions, but you need to wire the next tranche of $250,000 tomorrow. The fact that this call was to a Nicosia-based consulting group and not an official government line proves it was off the books. And the fact that it preceded the payment by exactly 24 hours removes any doubt about retainers or long-term contracts. This was cash-on-delivery corruption, the legal pivot from ethics to crime. At this point in the hearing, Warren stops acting like a senator and starts acting like a federal prosecutor. She begins listing the statutes. Subpoenas will issue, Justice Department referral for FARA violations, false statements, and obstruction proceeds today. This is the verdict phase of the video. We need to explain to the audience why this matters legally. FARA violations, failing to register as a foreign agent. That's the Manafort charge. That gets you house arrest. False statements, 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, lying to Congress. That's a felony. 5 years per count. Obstruction of justice, destroying the encryption keys. That's the big one. That's 20 years. Bondi walked into that room thinking she was facing a political problem. She is walking out facing a criminal indictment. The cover-up is always worse than the crime. If she had just taken the money and admitted it, she might have resigned in disgrace. But by meeting Volkov, by deleting the keys, by dissolving the LLC, she turned a resignation into a prison sentence. The end of the facade. The final image of the hearing is powerful. Warren stands up. She closes the folder. The folder's shut. January 14th, 5 days from now. You return under oath. Bondi is left sitting there. The water glass is still untouched. The room is clearing out. The reporters are running to the hallway to file their stories. In those closing moments, we see the total collapse of the telegenic warrior. The suit doesn't matter anymore. The smile is gone. The hair is perfect, but the person underneath is hollowed out. She is thinking about the subpoenas. She is thinking about Volkov. She is thinking about the encryption keys she thought were safe. She is realizing that in the digital age, you can delete a file, but you can never delete the footprint of the deletion. The cover-up failed. And now, we move to the final chapter. What does this fictional story tell us about the very real world we live in? The hearing ended at 3:15 p.m. Pam Bondi walked out of the Hart Senate office building into a wall of flashbulbs. In D.C. parlance, we call this the perp walk, even if the handcuffs haven't been slapped on yet. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She got into a black SUV and disappeared into the Virginia suburbs. Inside the room, the staffers packed up the boxes. The C-SPAN cameras turned off. The blue folder was closed. In our story, this constructed reality of the Bondi-Warren Protocol, justice was swift. Subpoenas were issued that afternoon. The news cycle exploded. The telegenic warrior fell, and the schoolmarm hunter prevailed. But now we have to do something difficult. We have to turn off the movie. We have to step back from the thrill of the gotcha moment and ask the uncomfortable question: why does this feel so good? And more importantly, why does it feel so foreign? The catharsis of competence. This video didn't go viral because people care about Latvian banking regulations. It didn't go viral because people love FinCEN reports. It went viral because it is competence porn. We live in an era of political incompetence. We're used to hearings where senators don't know how Facebook works. Senator, we run ads. We're used to hearings where the witness filibusters for 5 minutes and says nothing. We're used to bombshell reports that turn into nothing burgers. In the real world, the bad guys rarely get destroyed in 83 seconds. They usually get a book deal, a contributor contract on cable news, or a pardon. Watching Elizabeth Warren dismantle Bondi with surgical precision, using dates, dollar amounts, and undeniable logic, triggers a deep, almost desperate psychological need in the electorate. We are starving for a government that works. We are starving for a world where actions have consequences. This fictional scenario is a fantasy. But it's not a fantasy about dragons or spaceships. It's a fantasy about accountability. It is a simulation of what a functioning democracy should look like. The uncanny valley of truth. What makes this script so terrifying is how close it hugs the shoreline of reality. Everything we discussed, the Cypress shell companies, the correspondent banking loopholes, the destruction of encryption keys, is 100% real. This is how the game is actually played. Russian money does move through the Baltics. Delaware LLCs are used to hide ownership. Politicians use technical violations as an excuse for corruption. The only fiction in this story is the result. In the real world, Bondi might have said, "I don't recall," and the clock would have run out. In the real world, the encryption keys would be gone, and the DOJ would say, "We can't prove intent," and drop the case. The fiction isn't the crime. The fiction is the punishment. The glass house effect. There's a moment in the hearing, right when Warren shows the email about low-risk technical violations, where the fourth wall of politics breaks. Usually, politicians live in a glass house, but the glass is one way. They can see out, but we can't see in. They use jargon to fog the glass. They use regulatory feasibility and compliance burdens to make the glass opaque. Warren took a squeegee to the glass. She translated the jargon. This is the lesson for every journalist, every voter, and every future prosecutor watching this. Complexity is the refuge of the scoundrel. When a politician or a CEO starts using complex, boring language to explain a simple transaction, they are hiding something. Bondi tried to hide $847,000 behind the boring wall of banking regulations. Warren didn't let her. We need to learn to spot the boredom defense. When your eyes start to glaze over, that's usually when your wallet is being stolen. The danger of the hero narrative. However, a word of caution. We shouldn't leave this analysis thinking that Elizabeth Warren, or the character of her, is a savior. This video frames her as the hero, the avenging librarian. But notice that even in this perfect scenario, the corruption had been going on for months. The money was already moved. The policy was already influenced. The Bondi-Warren Protocol teaches us that oversight is reactive. The system caught her, yes, but only after she had already sold out the policy. The hero isn't the senator. The hero is the whistleblower. Remember the FinCEN reports Warren mentioned? Those didn't appear by magic. Someone in the Treasury Department, a nameless bureaucrat, saw the wire transfer. They saw the Baltic-Rietum pattern, and they decided to flag it. In our obsession with the gladiators on TV, the Bondis and the Warrens, we forget the machinery. The real heroes of accountability are the forensic accountants, the archivists, the low-level staffers who notice that a timestamp doesn't match. Finally, let's talk about the future. The most chilling part of the story wasn't the money. It was the digital footprint, the IP addresses, the server logs, the metadata. Bondi represents the old guard of corruption. She thought she could shred the papers and burn the tapes. She didn't realize that in 2026, there are no papers. There are only packets of data, and data never truly dies. This story serves as a warning to the corrupt. You are leaving a trail. You might use Signal. You might use a VPN. You might use a shell company. But somewhere, a server is logging your connection time. Somewhere, a bank is logging a correspondent transaction. We are entering an age of radical transparency, whether the powerful like it or not. The tools that allow them to move money, the global digital banking system, are the same tools that will eventually hang them. So what is the verdict on Warren reveals $847,000 in Russian ties? It is a masterpiece of political theater. It is a tragedy about greed, and it is a horror movie for the establishment. But mostly, it is a mirror. It shows us the corruption we suspect exists. It shows us the justice we wish existed. And it challenges us to close the gap between the two. We may never see this exact hearing in real life. We may never see Pam Bondi or any other figure sit in that chair and freeze for 83 seconds while their career disintegrates. But we can demand the standard. We can demand that "I don't recall" is not an acceptable answer. We can demand that technical violation is not an excuse for treason. The script is fictional. The standard shouldn't be. If you found this deep dive valuable, if you enjoyed dissecting the mechanics of the laundromat and the psychology of the cover-up, you know what to do. Don't just share the video. Share the literacy. Next time a politician uses boring words to explain a scandal, remember Pam Bondi's regulatory feasibility. Remember the $847,000. And ask the follow-up question.